The 135th edition of the Royce Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been, there ever will be.
Nate Humphrey hands King Rice the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered by Minnie.
With 20 seconds left to play, goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national dadgum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Royce Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of the Royce Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. We are back with another loaded episode. Of course, the last time we talked to you, we were going through the breaking news of Jeremiah Francis' transfer. Today, we've got more breaking news, and that is that Kerwin Walton, after a almost 2-day saga, has decided to bring his talents and join the 2020 UNC recruiting class, and this is going to put Carolina's class over the top. Anthony, this is the guy that really since the end of March into April, Tar Heel fans that are really big in the recruiting world had their eyes on him coming and playing with or for Roy Williams and joining all the other guys in the class. And he was the guy that was believed to put this class over the top, gives us that wing player that we so desperately needed, 3-point shooting specialist. He's going to bring a lot to the table, and it took a while to get him on board, but we're definitely glad he's a Tar Heel.
Are we really sure that he's actually committed to the class? Because this has been the wildest recruitment that I think Carolina basketball has probably ever been a part of, at least from what I can remember. Not only was, the media around Tar Heel basketball up in, a little bit of an uproar. I mean, the fan base was just tearing each other apart limb from limb on Saturday night and then well into yesterday, Sunday. But now he jumps on this morning, sticks by the commitment time that he gave Evan Daniels, 24/7 Sports. And shortly after 11 o'clock, he ends up announcing that he is, in fact, committed to Carolina. And, you mentioned it. It's a huge land for the Tar Heels in this class. Now a little bit closer to filling the scholarship limit that they have on the roster, of course, now. Just one scholarship available. And the biggest thing that I think that this does, and I think this should be the main talking point about what this does, even if you're maybe thinking, well, this is a 4-star guy, how much upside does he really have? The main thing that you should take away from this is that this allows R.J. Davis to pretty much fully move over to point guard if Carolina really needs him there. And that was one of the big things that we talked about when we were on here the last time during Jeremiah Francis's transfer podcast, was that they're probably going to need R.J. Davis at point guard, because as of right now, the depth at point guard is pretty much about as thin as it was a year ago. And you're now relying on a guy in Anthony Harris to come back 100% from an injury that, was pretty brutal at the time, and is the second knee injury that he's had in as many years. So this is huge for Carolina in many different ways. It really helps that you get a shooter in there, especially after the struggles that they had last year. But in my mind, I think the biggest thing is that Carolina has a little bit of flexibility in terms of the guards that they have in the backcourt now. And it takes a little bit of pressure off of some of the other guys like Leaky Black and even KJ Smith potentially, now that you have another shooting guard in the class.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you got to look at is his commitment really helps looking at how the roster is going to move going forward. In an ideal world, you'd want R.J. Davis playing off the ball, but the unexpected transfer of Jeremiah Francis limits the amount of depth that you have at the point guard position. It's a good thing that R.J. has the ability to play with the ball in his hands. And so now, at least for his first year, you can focus on him mainly being a point guard in the reserve role while you put Kerwin Walton off the ball. And Walton's a guy that can shoot the ball coming off screens, but also can create with the ball in his hands. He's got a mid-range floater game, something we haven't seen really be effective since Justin Jackson was on campus. And, of course, he was a big part of that 2017 national title game. He's a good and willing defender, which I guess is always good if a guy's willing to defend because defense is more about want to than ever is about talent. And it's just getting this wing player, I think, is something that Carolina needed mainly after you lost Francis. So you and I weren't really overly concerned about the wing talent coming in because you're bringing in 2 5-stars and a 4-star. Okay, the talent's pretty good. You lose Francis now. You could see where Tar Heel fans were somewhat worried with the wing talent and wing depth. He's going to somewhat fix that right away. Some quotes from him about joining the Carolina basketball program. I just had a really good relationship with the coaches. The atmosphere was really great there. The fans show a lot of love. I thought it was the biggest stage in college basketball and a great place for me to learn and grow. And lastly, I just felt like the competitiveness, the culture, and tradition best suited me. I felt like I wanted to play at the highest level. This is the highest level of college basketball. Another thing that you got to look at with him is barring some breakout year, which he's going to be primarily using a reserve role, he's going to be on campus for at least 2 to 3 years, which is something that Carolina's got to look at when they're recruiting because they've entered the one-and-done era to some capacity, losing Kobe White, losing Cole Anthony, Nazir Little. We know Roy Williams wants to have guys that are going to stick around for a long time to mix with the young talent that's going to come and leave after 1 year. You feel like you've got that with Walton.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things about this class that maybe people won't talk about as much because they're going to focus on the 5-stars at the top. You've got a class that kind of gets back to what we really want to see at Carolina, which is the guys that are going to stick around for a decent period of time. I mean, one-and-dones is something that, we got a little bit of an experience of this past season. And I'm going to be honest with you, we talked about it a lot here on the podcast. This is just not a system at Carolina right now under Roy Williams where one-and-dones is the way to go. You need the guys that are going to be around for a while, that are going to learn the system, that are going to learn to play with each other. And I think that, this is exactly what they're getting in this class. There's not going to be another season like this 2019 season, you would think, because you're going to have these guys that are going to stick around for a good amount of time. I mean, even the 5-stars, there's not really a guy that you look at and say for sure we know that he's going to go to the NBA. Caleb Love is probably your best bet, but even him, you don't really know because he's not on the same level as Cole Anthony. He's not a guy that you're looking at and saying, without a doubt, he's going. Without a doubt, he's one of the top 5 players in this class in terms of, just pure talent. So that's something that I think Carolina fans can kind of rejoice in because I know a lot of them kind of feel the same way as us, is that we want these guys that are going to be around for a while. And then, you talked about, we're not really as concerned with the perimeter shooting. It's always good to bring in another shooter, though. And as we've seen, unfortunately, you can't always bank on these guys coming in and being the shooters that they were in high school. Most people probably don't remember Theo Pinson was a phenomenal shooter at the high school level. That really just didn't translate to the college level. So I think that this is big. Get as many of those types of guys as he can in there, and I think Walton. I know a lot of people were really, as the day wore on Saturday and got into Sunday, there were a lot of people that were really starting to get critical of his game and saying we don't really need this guy. Honestly, we're just kind of wasting our time. Look, this is a player that can come in and help Carolina. It may take a little bit of time, but there is some talent there. And here's what I'm going to tell people, and they should kind of be living by this anyways because of just how long he's been doing it. And we say this every year, so it really doesn't matter. Roy Williams is not going to recruit someone that doesn't fit his system at all. That's just not going to happen. So, especially a guy that's a 4-star. So you should believe that he's recruiting him for a reason. He fits what Carolina wants to do. And honestly, with Carolina in the position that they were in heading into this morning with losing Jeremiah Francis, this is a big deal for Carolina, and I'm glad that they were able to pull in Kerwin Walton despite what was just a hectic up and down roller coaster of a weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably speak to the fact that this is, the recruiting right now is all being done through FaceTime, phone calls, text messages, because they're not allowed to be on the road recruiting. I don't know how much of the coronavirus pandemic played into his decision to come to Carolina, delay his decision to come to Carolina. He's joining, as we've talked about, Roy Williams' best class since 2007 when he brought in Ty Lawson, Wayne Ellington, Brandon Wright. This class is much more deeper. He joins, as we've talked about, Caleb Love, Dayron Sharp, Walker Kessler, Puff Johnson, and R.J. Davis. So after a year of misery where Roy Williams was spewing that saying this team was the least talented team, the talent level upgrade is almost double. I guess you could kind of compared to what Mac Brown inherited on the football side of things, how he immediately upped the talent. Roy Williams, in less than a year, this roster is going to look completely different when we see this team on the court in November, just in terms of the pure basketball ability. And normally when Roy Williams has a lot of talent, and he talks about it all the time, and I mirror it a lot, nobody loves talent more than he does, more than I do. He's got to be able to coach that talent. Everything we've heard about Walton and all the guys coming in is they're coachable kids that are still going to learn and grow from one of the best in the college game. And so this is going to be a lot of fun and exciting. Do want to hinder the expectations because remember, they are only freshmen. This isn't Duke. This isn't Kentucky where we've been doing this for almost a decade now. We're going on maybe a third year of trying to learn how to play and count on a lot of freshmen. It's going to be a learning cycle for them as it will be the coaching staff. So anything else on the Kerwin Walton commit before we move on to our next topic?
No, I think that's really it. I'm glad that this is kind of behind us because waiting these last couple of days has been just unbelievably painful because, I mean, I've never spent this much time on social media, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's been since Saturday. We've been waiting by our phones for this announcement to come out so we could get all over this, and then now it's finally here. And like you said, it's good that it's finally come to a conclusion. Well, we'll move on. And as we talked the last week about the MJ documentary, we were going to go through this kind of every episode. We'd come on and talk about it. Last night was episodes 3 and 4. No UNC content as we were learning more about his time overcoming the Detroit Pistons. But these were 2 more phenomenal episodes we're seeing about Michael Jordan, the Chicago Bulls. And I think what really got it set off was the fact that less than 5 minutes in, there was 2 F-bombs dropped that kind of set the tone for the entire episodes. Was that you were going to get a little bit more, I guess, in-depth, a little more personal, I guess is what you could say. I've seen a lot of people talk about how you've seen Michael Jordan in a different light. He's more open and he's honest. He was every bit that last night, talking about whether it was his hatred for the Detroit Pistons, mainly Isaiah Thomas, the decision to let Dennis Rodman just go to Vegas during the middle of the year so he could get away for a couple of days and having to go take him out of his bed in a hotel room. Last night's episodes continue to deliver after the first weeks, wouldn't you say?
Here, I mean, you said that we've seen maybe a different side of Michael Jordan. I feel like this has probably always been there. He's not really a big-time media guy, and we can kind of see just from watching the documentary why he probably isn't a huge media guy, and it's because of that final season where they just kept asking him over and over again, are you retiring? Are you retiring? Are you retiring? Every stop that he went. And yeah, I tweeted that out. First 5 minutes of the show, 2 F-bombs